Hi, everybody. Thank you for staying to listen to this conversation with the director of Cinema Habana, Kaveh Nabatian, writer, director, and composer, I should say. Thank you for staying. My name is Celine. I'm the head of film programming at Bend Film. Thank you for joining us, Kaveh. Nice to finally meet you after all the email exchanges.
Nice to meet you too.
So I'm going to jump right in. So you are in Canada, and you're a Canadian filmmaker. I'm wondering how your connection to Cuba began to make this film. Like, did you write the film to be set in Cuba, or did you go to Cuba and want to make a film that's set there? Like, what was the beginning and the connection to Cuba for you?
I think my connection to Cuba was a pretty typical one. It was like the early 2000s, and there was the Buena Vista Social Club record and the Vin Vendors movie and everything. And I'm a musician, so I was excited about Cuba like everybody else. And so I went down there to write a script for a different film, actually, that never got made. And I was really interested in the relationship that Cubans have with foreigners, and the relationship, and in particular sex tourism, and the kind of like love tourism, and the kind of relationships that pop up between young Cubans, and in particular young Cuban men and older foreign women. Just because it was something I hadn't seen a lot of before, even in my travels. It's usually the other way around. And so that was just something I was interested in. And then at the same time, I was playing music with Pablo Herrera, who's a Cuban hip hop producer and academic and poet. And he had a real desire to show Afro-Cuban culture in cinema in a way that it hasn't really been shown very often. Afro-Cuban culture tends to be kind of exotified or put to the side in Cuban cinema. And so we put those two together and tried to show a real story of like what happens when two people who are seeing each other as an escape actually have to live together and have to actually, get beyond the symbolism that they represent to each other and find the humanity that's behind
that. So were you always interested in immigration stories in particular, or the starting point was more like about dance and music and reflecting what's going on, what you're talking about, the love tourism? Like, I don't know, what's the attraction with immigration and how that all came together? Because there's so much going on, it feels like, in the film, with the dance and the music and the love triangle and also the immigration journey of belonging, fitting in, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's like a kind of a template for how immigration stories tend to go. And I wanted to show a different perspective. And I think part of the reason for that is that both of my parents are immigrants. So my dad is from Iran. My mother is American. I was born in Canada. And I've lived between Montreal and New York City. So I've never really had a sense of belonging, particularly to any place. And definitely, growing up with my dad, who spoke with a strong accent and really missed Iran, but was also very resentful towards Iran and had all these kind of like, difficult and more complex relationship to his home country and his adopted country. I was just around that my whole life. And so stories of immigration and stories of people on the margins of society have just always interested me. And so this was a way to combine my interest in immigration and the idea of like finding a new home and what that means with music and dance, and also this whole curiosity I had about sex tourism and the idea of like, in particular, I think that we tend to see everything in such a polarized way. Like either you have pure love or you have transactional sex. And actually, I think that we're all somewhere in a spectrum. Everybody's getting something out of somebody, but then it can also be some sort of real emotion. So I wanted to look at those gray areas and those nuances, and also the nuances of what it means to leave Cuba, because I think for a lot of Cubans, there's this idea that you arrive in Canada or the United States or whatever, and everything's easy. I mean, same for, I think, for my dad, for most immigrants, there's this idea of what America is, and the reality is a lot more challenging. And so I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, there are so many like natural conflicts that are like ready to be explored with the whole love thing that you're talking about, that you might even fall in love with the person that you're just maybe using as a tool for another thing. I what I found really interesting and exciting about the film is usually with these films it's this, you know, white pure Western person who's clueless that's kind of getting into this kind of relationship, and like, and that contrast is played out. Whereas Nasim, she herself is I think maybe second generation coming from an immigrant, so she's kind of not like this Western woman who was always generations for in Canada. So was that an intentional choice to add yet another layer to the story?
Well, I mean, actually, the original lady was a white lady, but then, so I mean, I just thought it'd be more interesting to show Montreal not as a place uh, of encounter, rather than a place where somebody, this is like my home and you're visiting my home. These are two people who are stuck in this like idealized place that actually isn't so ideal, and I think that that's just a reality for so many people. So I think that's interesting, but also like once I started really thinking about it, because I was getting questions from the funders about this, like why not make her a white lady? I was like, well, why would I? You know, like why is it that the base level person in a movie should be a white person? It doesn't make any sense. We live in these multicultural cities, and the, you know, the world is becoming more and more diverse, and we're talking about diversity all the time. And yet, when we talk about an immigration story, there's this assumption that it's going to be the foreign, the other coming into the white person's world, or the white person going into the other's world. But what about when it's two others? And in fact, aren't we all really others? You know, that was kind of what I was interested in.
Yeah, that's exactly what really resonated with me, like that representation of shades of like several levels and layers of belonging,
Yeah.
rather than I belong, you don't belong, you know, that things aren't that black and white. So what were the things, conversations between you and your DP, in terms of color and movement and how to kind of be with the actors and how to present their situation, emotion, etc., and how that compared to your directions in Cuba versus in Canada, like how you made those choices
Yeah.
stylistically.
So the idea was to really try to make the form of the film another character, and to kind of represent Leonardo's soul in a way. And so in Cuba, Cuba's a world that Leonardo understands. You know, he's lived his whole life there. He can see everything. He's not, there's not really any confusion about his place in that world. And so we used spherical lenses there, which allowed us to get close to the character, but also see into the distance and kind of create this sense of home. And then when he arrives in Canada, all of a sudden his vision literally starts to go blurry, and he needs glasses. And so we also switched to anamorphic lenses, where you've just got this very thin focal plane that's in focus, and everything else is blurry. And so that was kind of representing Leonardo's way of seeing the world. And then in terms of the colors, I mean, you know, we were thinking a lot about Wong Kar-wai and Happy Together in particular, because that's a story about two people who are stuck in Buenos Aires, who aren't Argentinian, and the stories of love and loss there. And there's something about the kind of kinetic energy of that film and the colors that was inspired. And then more specifically, we were really interested in the photography of Alex Webb, who's a Magnum photographer who shot a lot in Haiti and Cuba, and who had this kind of really dynamic way of shooting like through things and having a real sense of like near and far and depth. And then when we got to Canada, we were more interested in Pinkasov, who's another Magnum photographer, who had this very, you know, like beautiful wide expanses and this kind of like, yeah, one thing in focus at a time world. And then at the end, once the three of them meet in the cafe and his world kind of goes inside out, then the idea is that we're like inside the marble. And so that's why there's that diopter in front of the lens. It's kind of like breaking the image in half, because the idea is that we're sort of inside the marble, being Leonardo's destiny. It's like we're inside the marble and seeing out from the marble, because his destiny is shifted.
Um, So, and how does music play into that? You composed for the film. So were you already making the music and then while you were filming, you were using it, or was it after the fact you came and, how was, because music is so much a part of the film. How did it go in the process of the making of it?
Yeah, I mean, we ended up like I was definitely playing a lot of music during takes, and then in most of those cases, the music, we ended up not having the rights to it, so I had to write something that would sound sort of similar, have the same tempo, or have a similar vibe. But I like to leave a lot of things up to kind of like the cinema gods to decide. And I feel like the more kind of freedom I give to the movie to express itself, the more I get from it. So, for example, the main theme of the film, the Nunca te lo diré, which the old woman sings in the when she's chopping onions, and then you see Sarah with the yellow umbrella, and that whole scene. So I knew that that woman who was playing the grandmother wasn't a really good singer, and so on the day we were just like while she was chopping onions, I was like, why don't you just sing a song? And it's this beautiful song. First of all, I think the melody is so amazing, but it's also like, um, don't ask me why I'm sad because I'll never tell you. And it's all about like all the secrets we hold. And it just felt so perfect, like I couldn't have asked for a better film, a better song to kind of like encapsulate the film. And then so we took that melody, and then a lot of what's the score music uses, like if not that song, it's like intervals or little hints of that music. And so I kind of constructed the entire sound design around that song that was totally just a piece of luck.
That's really amazing. And how is your general like approach as a director kind of be improvisational a little bit in performances, in dialogue, even possibly the DP's interaction with the characters in the moment? Like, is that your general approach, or was it like, this is how I'm approaching this particular film because of the subject matter? Like, how does that?
Yeah, I mean, for this one, I wanted it because also we were using non-actors, and so I didn't want to be too rigid. Um, what we did was, in terms of the dialogue, what kind of luckily, the script was in English, but a lot of the actors couldn't really read English very well. So when we were in rehearsal, I had to explain what was happening in each scene, and then they would translate it themselves. And so then they ended up translating it with their own words, which is way better than what I could have written for them. And that's something I will actually plan to do in the future too, is like just come with the scene and let them have their own words to describe it, because then, especially for non-actors, they're not like trying to get out these words that all came out of my head. It's like it's their own, they're able to express themselves in a different way. And then in terms of, like I knew what I wanted, but I also come from a bit of a documentary background. So in documentary, you often know pretty much what you want. You try to create a space where you'll get what you want, but you're not totally controlling all of the elements. And I like to like play with that line of control, and let, again, let the cinema gods come and filter their way through. So there wasn't much improvisation when we were actually shooting. A lot of it was figured out in rehearsal. But whenever if there's something that just happened, we'd go for it. If it suddenly started to rain, be like, all right, let's shoot outside, let's run back inside, let's move around and follow what's happening with the energy of the film. And then the way Juan Pablo shoots, or the way we chose to shoot this, is basically he does a master shot following two people who are, or whatever the main energy is. He does kind of a master wide, but moving, and then he does a master close up following the person, and then another master close up following the other person. And then so when we're editing, we're cutting from all these three moving shots or four moving shots, and so it gives us, especially in Cuba, I think it gives us real sense of dynamism. And it's like we knew about what was going to happen, but I wouldn't know when he was going to like go up a little bit, or move back a little bit. Like he was just trying to follow the story as much as possible. And so then that gives you this like, yeah, this real kind of organic energy that's not hyper controlled, but it's definitely not exactly improvisational either. It's like, yeah, it's like, so there's this line there that I think is really exciting.
Interesting. And you're watching all this from a monitor, and you're in the same room, and like you're talking over it, or you're like waiting for it to happen and then for the other take you're coming? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm like
No, I
getting
like
really
this.
detailed, but I'm really curious.
No, this is good questions. I like it. So what's happening is no, so yeah, and some DPs get kind of annoyed by this, but what I do is he's got his camera, and then he's got a second monitor right on the camera, right? And I try to avoid looking at the camera very much at all. I rarely, unless it's like really like an aesthetic shot, then I'll be looking at the monitor. But if there's acting going on, especially with non-actors, but I think anytime I'm trying to be really just with the actors and watching them in detail, and to just have enough faith in the DP that he's getting it, and every once in a while I'll kind of glance over, make sure the framing is making sense to me. And then I'll have enough of an idea of what he did that then in the next take I can be, okay, let's do it again, but let's be a little bit wider. But what's really important to me is the performance. And I know Juan Pablo is going to get a good shot, and then if there's any doubt, I can always do a playback, and then we can be like, okay, let's change this around. But I like just keeping it moving and making sure I was getting the performances I wanted, and really, focusing on that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to do it. Because I think when you're looking at a monitor, maybe it's like looking at a screen while you're talking to somebody, they feel like you're detached even though you're watching them. But if you're looking at them, and they could probably see you from the corner of their eye or something, and that's like you're connected. I don't know. That's my interpretation of what you just said.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it also would be like, there's so many little cues that you can't get off of a monitor.
Wait, you got cut off for me a little bit.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead, go for it.
I was saying there's so many cues that are, I think, hard to pick up from a monitor, and especially energetic cues, like there'd be times when I'd feel Yona, the guy who plays Leonardo's energy kind of like flagging a little bit because I'm so close to him. And so then I'd be like, all right. And he's an athlete, he's a ballet dancer. So I'd be like, okay, let's get down on the floor and do 20 push-ups. So the two of us would get down and do 20 push-ups. And I think if I'd been behind a monitor, like, 10 feet away, I would have known something was wrong, but I might not have been like in with him enough to catch that energy to correct it.
So then what was it like working with non-actors who are obviously used to performing, sounds like how did you, I don't know, have them be more at ease and deliver what you need out of them? Like how did you manage that situation, and what was their reaction to you?
I mean, to be honest, it was slow. It was painful at the beginning a little bit, but luckily we had some rehearsal time, and I was nervous with my first feature, my first film with any kind of like serious money, but and I mean it's still not that much money, but it was money. And we had Yona flew in from Germany, we had people from Quebec, and it was crazy. And we were in Cuba, and I think we were all nervous, and it took a while to calm those nerves, and especially for like Yona, for example, is used to performing, yeah, but he performed in front of like 6,000 people, and he does it once that night, and then it's it, and then he does it once again the next night. The idea of doing multiple takes was a bit challenging for him. He didn't understand why we needed to do it so many times, and he also had to learn how to pace his energy so he's not going full on the first take and then exhausted by the second take. And so it was, luckily we had a couple of weeks to rehearse, and it was during rehearsal I wasn't really sure if we had a movie or not, and then we all just started getting more comfortable with each other. And it was also a lot about going out for lunch together and hanging out and like not acting and not like it's a movie about intimacy or a lack of intimacy, and so the actors had to know each other in order to be able to get past their nerves and develop real relationships. So yeah, it was really just about finding a rhythm that made sense to us, because a normal rhythm of like, all right, a few days of rehearsal and let's go, and this is your lines, it just wouldn't have worked. It had to be a much more familial kind of experience.
Yeah. Like how about the editing process? Is it like for you, because your film in particular is so much about rhythm, is that a like a chance? Was it like when you got to editing, was it another chance to like remake and recompose the film, or were you just kind of like, okay, this is what I shot, like this is what I set out to do in my script, so I'm just going to put everything in its right place? Like, how organic was that process, and was it a frustrating process, or was it like a comforting process to finally sit just with the images and the sound?
Yeah, these are good questions. I like it. It was so I kind of shoot a lot of stuff that I don't know if I'll use. That it is more about energy, like stuff about the city, or rollerbladers in the streets. It's like, I don't know if I'll use that or not, but it's got a certain energy that I feel like could be expressive. So it's definitely not a matter of just like putting it together. The editor I worked with has also worked with Denis Coté. He's makes amazing movies, and like his last movie, I think they edited it's a feature film. They edited it in 4 or 5 days. Like me, it was like 5 months or something, because he knows going in exactly what he wants, where it's going to cut. It's like maybe this take or that take, but that's it, and then you just put it together. And with me, especially working with non-actors, so there's some acting issues, and and the way Juan Pablo shoots is kind of crazy and like organic. So it was all very, very organic. And for me, even in the best case scenario, like putting together a first cut of anything, even like a music video, is a nightmare for me. I hate it. There's too many possibilities. But then once there's like a cut, then I can get really involved. And so it was cool because Sophie Leblanc, who's the editor, she taught me how to use Avid, because I use Premiere normally. And so then we'd start just bouncing edits back and forth. And like I'm maybe stronger at editing like dance and musical, like really rhythmic stuff, and she's much stronger at the structure. So she would put the bones together, and then I'd like play over here and play over there. And it was a lot of bouncing back and forth. We also like took time off, and then we went to my cottage and set up a little editing studio at my cottage. And then she came down to New York and went up to Montreal, and it was like, which gave us time to really reflect on what we actually had. Whereas I think if we'd had a classic, edit 9 to 5, 5 days a week for like 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever number of weeks you get, I don't think we would have ended up with this movie. It needed to like breathe and find itself and tell us what it needed.
And how about like so in Canada, you do government funding, correct?
Yeah.
For most of the filmmaking. So how does that work for you, like to convince people or to get the funds that you need? Is it like, I've got this great cast, like what's your methods of convincing people to give you what you need so you can make a film? Or is it a teaser? Like, did you do a teaser, or did you just mainly rely on your past work to kind of speak to what you're going to do?
Yeah, no, it's a totally different approach in Canada than it is in the US. It's very much based on, in total, I shouldn't say totally, but it's based on grant proposals. You apply for a grant, they say no, they say these are the problems, you rewrite it, a different jury reads it, they don't like what you wrote this time, go back, rewrite it. I think we were refused 3 times from the main funding organization, and you only get 3 chances, but they were like, but we like this, so we're going to give you a 4th chance. And then you go in, and so if you get to the short list, then you go in and you defend it. So, at the end of the day, it's all really the same. It's about passion and preparation, whether you're in the US or Canada or whatever. But the way it functions here is very much these like granting agencies. And then if you get one on board, then all of a sudden all the other ones want to get in. And each one has a different, criteria. Like this one is 20% past work, 15% if the budget makes sense, 65% the creative process, whatever. And so all the things, I think it's universal. It's like, if you have a good cast, I think people were excited that Yona Acosta was going to be Leonardo. I've done enough stuff that was like relatively successful. So, but I'm not a big shot. So that's part of why it took, a bunch of tries to get it made. But eventually I think we got the story into a place that was convincing, and we were like clear enough about what we wanted to do that they like broke down and gave it to us.
Yeah, I kind of got curious about it because you said it took 5 months to edit. Do you have that kind of freedom to shoot as long as you can afford, and then edit for as long as, or is there like a timeline that you need to live?
Our timelines were definitely really loose, but but our budget was not loose. Like it was a pretty low budget film. And so we shot for 25 days, which is not bad, but there was definitely not a penny more for that. And then in terms of the editing, it was like we had a certain number of days in a nice editing suite, and then when we were like running out, it's like, all right, let's go to my cottage where it's free. And luckily, Sophie, the editor, was willing to work for a cut rate for a certain number of days, and I was willing to I was working for free the whole time basically, and until we got it made. So yeah, it wasn't that like we had unlimited money by any stretch, but with it, it's not like there was like this movie has to come out at this time, otherwise forget it. It's like there's nothing particularly like salient about a date. It was more like, this is a universal enough story that let's make it a good movie, and then that'll be the best thing for it.
So since this film has like extra challenges of logistics and international filming, like what were the biggest like challenges and obstacles, like the biggest frustrations, stressors of the process?
Man, I don't know where to start. There's so many. I worked on this movie for like ever, like 10 years or something. So, but I mean, definitely the most terrifying moment was about 2 months before we were supposed to start shooting in Cuba. They revoked our permit. They had said yes to shooting in Cuba, the ICAIC, which is the Institute of Cinematography in Cuba. And then a couple months before, they revoked it, and they didn't tell us why. And so we were like, okay, we finally gotten the money together. We're ready to go. What do we do? Like, we started looking at, can we shoot this in Santo Domingo? And it's like, there's no way, it's a different culture, and I didn't want to mess with that. But, it was just like basically panic, because we didn't know what was going on. And eventually our fixer down there, who is, he's more than a like line producer or whatever you want to call him, he managed to get a meeting with the Minister of Culture. Like, he had to like climb all the way up to find out what the problem was. And in the end, it was basically 3 words in the script that needed to be changed. I changed it. It took me like 2 minutes, and then we resubmitted it, and it was approved. But if he hadn't climbed that ladder, we just wouldn't have been able to shoot. And
what were those 3 words?
Well, yeah, maybe it was more like 2 sentences. But originally, the Leonardo is at the Ballet Nacional de Cuba, the Cuban National Ballet, and because there's like an implication of racism within that company, the Minister of Culture was taking it to mean that there's racism. That Alicia Alonso, who's the prima ballerina absoluta, who runs the Cuban, or who until she died a couple of years ago, ran the Cuban National Ballet, it would imply that she was racist, and that if she's racist, then basically Fidel is racist, and therefore the revolution is racist. Because Alicia Alonso is like one of the great heroes of the revolution. So as long as there was no mention of the Ballet Nacional de Cuba, and we just understood that it was an important company, they had no problem at all. So I just took out Ballet Nacional de Cuba, and it was gone. And then the other thing was, in the scene in the Callejón de Hamo where Leonardo takes Nassim to dance the Afro-Cuban music, there was a kid selling gum, which is something that happens. But showing a kid selling gum means that there's children in poverty, and in the revolution, there's no children in poverty. So I literally erased 1 line and 3 words, and it was good. But wow. But you can imagine for the 7 weeks until we got the approval, it was just like, I wasn't sleeping, and the panic is just awful.
Oh gosh, I can imagine. So about the story, so the audience will have seen the film when they watch this, hopefully. But I'm curious about the finale, because the finale is very kind of very obscure, right? Not just like open-ended, but it's almost like you're not allowed to know more about this. It's all, it can go in any direction. Like, it's truly like, I don't know, it felt to me like I can't even guess where it could go from here. Like, because Leonardo's mind was so torn, I guess, and I couldn't even guess like where he would take it. Did you feel like you had a full grasp of where Leonardo's decisions and future lies in your mind? And did Leonardo, like, well, Yona,
Yoda. Mhm.
did Yona like know, like, did you give him any kind of notes on what's going on, but you decided to leave that out? Like, what was the process there?
Well, the idea is that, the movie's about a guy who's lost, who finds himself at the end. And that's the kind of the arc. And that's what I told Yona, is that you don't know exactly where your life is going to go right now, but like he spent the whole journey is about him trying to dance that dance that he's got in his mind that he sees over and over again. And then at the end, he finally dances that dance. He dances this dance of Chango, and he becomes one with his destiny. So whether he goes back to Nassim or not, it doesn't even really matter that much. Like, what's important is, to me anyway, is that everybody got what they wanted. Like he's able to express himself as a dancer, and he was able to find, to become one with his destiny again. Nassim wanted a kid, is going to have a kid. Sada wanted to get to Canada. She got to Canada. So it's like none of them got it in the way that they planned, but they all got what they wanted. And so what was important to me was to make those there's actually no dialogue for the last 7 minutes of the film. And in a way, like, the idea of ritual is really important. Like, the film starts with a ritual. And what I wanted was for those last 7 minutes to become like a ritual for the audience. And it's too bad that people can't watch it in a theater, because in a theater with the sound and the image, it becomes very, very like intense. And the idea was to feel this destiny kind of, shifting and coming back to Leonardo. And so, yeah, probably realistically, based on people I know, I don't think Nassim and Leonardo are going to end up together and be happily ever after. I think he'll probably be in her life and be a father to the kid, but that's not what this movie was about. That's kind of it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't really matter. They all got to where they got, and that was what was important.
Yeah, but by that point, you're so invested in the characters. Like, I really want to. What's he gonna do?
Yeah. Well, for the Iranians in the crowd, they'll know what happened. And it's actually cool, because it's being released theatrically in Quebec right now. So I'm going to all these Q&As, and there was one Iranian woman in the audience, and somebody had asked a question kind of similar, and then she was like, "The name of that last song is Divorce, and it's about how you can, like, you're not what I thought, but I'll always have feelings for you." And so I kind of made, like, I didn't really want to give away the ending, but I was like, any Iranian who hears this song at the end, like over the credits, is gonna know what happened. So it was like a little message for them.
That's nice. It's a nice insider and knowledge. So I'm curious, where can the audience find Sin La Habana? Like, does it get distribution? Does it have a continuing on its festival journey?
Yeah, it's still on its festival journey. It was theatrically released here for 4 weeks, which was awesome. And it's in its last few days. And I'm going to Vancouver in a couple of days for the festival there. So it's still on the festival circuit, and it's going to be released in Canada, the rest of Canada, in a month or so. We don't have a US distributor locked, but there's some interest. So I'm hoping it'll come out and at least play major cities and be on some sort of streaming service. And, the more people who talk about it, the better, let your people know. But yeah, the hope is that it gets out there and seen by as many people as possible.
Yeah, I very much so as well. And so that our audience who watch it can spread the word and contribute to its success. And what's next for you as a filmmaker? You mentioned that you're working on, you even did a first draft of your next movie. So how long have you been working on that, and when is that coming out?
Well, this one, the one I'm finishing right now, it's only been a few years. So for me, that's pretty fast. But it's shot in Haiti. It's kind of a hybrid documentary, a dance music documentary about ritual and ceremonies of transformation in Haiti, and how Haitian people use those rituals to find strength and resilience in the face of the kind of oppression that they face there. I used to teach at the film school in Haiti, and I've spent a lot of time in Haiti, and it's a culture that I love and that I find fascinating. And so we made this, very poetic documentary that kind of puts you in the world of Haiti and the way they're using ritual to to live and to have, I think, the most rich culture I've seen in the world, despite the difficulties. So there's that, and then my next fiction film is a it's kind of like a film noir that takes place in Thailand about a man who falls in love with a woman who only exists in his dreams. And the person who controls the gateway to the dream world is played by my dad, who is the father in Sin La Habana. I don't know if people know that, but the mean dad in Sin La Habana was actually my dad, and that was his first acting role. And I thought he was amazing. But so yeah, the idea is to have him, but a very fantastical version of him as the gatekeeper. So yeah, look out for a Thai film noir in the next few years.
Is your father an actor?
That was his first role.
All right.
And
You must be happy with him.
I think he did a great job. He drew on something to become a scary racist dude, and it was powerful. And the mother was played by my aunt, so it was cool. It had a little family thing.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And that's great. You're continuing to give them roles.
Very good. Why not?
That's great. I really do look forward to your next films. They both sound fascinating. And thank you very much for your time and for sharing your film with the Bend Film audience.
No, thank you so much. I really want to go check you guys out one of these years. It sounds like a beautiful place.
Yes, we wish you can come. Hopefully next time with your next film, or even without a film, come visit us.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.